6. Hume. David Hume, 1711 to 1776, carried the Enlightenment philosophy towards its logical conclusion in An Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding, 1748, a reworking of his earlier and fuller Treatise on Human Nature, written between 1734 and 1737 and published in 1739 to 1740. Hume did not deny material substance. He simply acted on the basic premise of the Enlightenment that the autonomous mind of man deals with ideas and not reality, and held philosophy strictly to that fact. As a strict empiricist, Hume wiped out every factor incompatible with strict empiricism. Ideas are copies of impressions. There are no innate ideas, no direct knowledge of any material substance, nor of spiritual substance. There are simply impressions and their fainter copy, the ideas. All ideas, especially abstract ones, are naturally faint and obscure. The mind has but a slender hold of them. They are apt to be confounded with other resembling ideas. When we have often employed any term, though without a distinct meaning, we are apt to imagine it has a determinate idea annexed to it. On the contrary, all impressions, that is, all sensations, either outward or inward, are strong and vivid. Man, therefore, can affirm neither the reality of spiritual substance nor of material substance. All he has are impressions and ideas. Hume thus limited the known world to the mind of man with its impressions and ideas. Ideas are related to one another by the three laws of association: resemblance, contiguity in time and space, and causation. But how are these laws derived from impressions, which must be the case, or else empiricism cannot be maintained? These three, resemblance, contiguity, and causation, are the only bonds that unite our thoughts together. Contiguity association has to do with outer impressions and descriptive sciences, causation association with inner impressions and metaphysics, and resemblance association with inner impressions and mathematics. Because the impressions continually conjoin, we believe in a necessary cause, that is, that water is wet and that fire will burn. Continual repetition of experienced impressions leads to the conclusion of necessity, but the necessity is in the mind, not in the outside world. Mathematics deals with resemblances within the mind and is thus valid unless it claims to be valid for an outside world. Contiguity association rests on a conclusion from the order and relationship of impressions, but any order can occur so that there is at best a probability concept available, not a law concerning outside reality. There is certainly a probability which arises from a superiority of chances on any side. In Hume's strict empiricism, there is no place whatever for God, and only a slim place for science in terms of probability concepts, not laws. There is no place either for the self of man as a spiritual substance. Instead of the self, there are only perceptions. I never can catch myself at any time with a perception, and never can observe anything but the perceptions. When my perceptions are removed for any time, as by sound sleep, so long am I insensible of myself, and may truly be said not to exist. In view of these things, it is not surprising that Hume found less reason to believe in miracles than in a material world. Hume did not deny belief. He denied the validity of the objects of belief. As a result, he was ready to commend an ethics which furthered certain social qualities, and he thus laid the foundations for the utilitarian and the pragmatic ethics of later eras. Virtue, for Hume, was simply every quality of the mind which is useful or agreeable to the person himself or to others. In terms of his own definition, Hume was a moral man. Since Hume could give no objective validity to science, he could give none, of course, to God, for, as he noted, While we cannot give a satisfactory reason why we believe after 1,000 experiments that a stone will fall or fire burn, can we ever satisfy ourselves concerning any determination which we may form with regard to the origin of the world and the situation of nature from and to eternity? The only objects of the abstract science or of demonstration are quantity and numbers, and all attempts to extend this more perfect species of knowledge beyond these bounds are mere sophistry and illusion. The only valid sciences are those of quantity and number, but this does not mean that these sciences reach an outside world. Thinking must be firmly rooted in impressions. If we reason a priori, anything may appear able to produce anything. The foundation of thinking about God is faith and divine revelation, and of ethics as grounded upon such a faith, the same must be said. Morality, like beauty, is really a question of taste. Hume concluded, "When we run over libraries, persuaded of these principles, what havoc must we make? If we take in our hand any volume of divinity or school metaphysics, for instance, let us ask, does it contain any abstract reasoning concerning quantity or number? No. Does it contain any experimental reasoning concerning matter of fact and existence? No. Commit it then to the flames, for it can contain nothing but sophistry and illusion." The humanistic faith of Hume thus ended as a principle of book burning. Hume rejected a priori thinking he felt, but did he? There is an a priori assumption at the heart of Hume's system, the presupposition of the autonomy of the mind of man. This a priori characterizes modern philosophy. It is at the heart of Descartes' "I think, therefore I am." At the end, with Hume, this a priori is almost all that remains. The I of Descartes has been greatly reduced. It is no longer a soul, a spiritual substance. There is neither spiritual nor material substance, but only thinking. This thinking can be divided, or must be, into two aspects, impressions and ideas, so that a dualism remains between ideas and the knowing process. There is no longer even a formal one, only the particulars, autonomous men, hence the individualism of Hume. The world of man is greatly reduced, however. Man is little more than a nexus of ideas. The world of nature is also reduced. It is now only a series of impressions. Freedom is associated with autonomous man, but how significant is the liberty of a mind without substance and without contact with anything else? Hume's world is one of a reduced particular and a reduced unity, and, like his world, Hume himself was a reduced man. Hume's application of his philosophy to politics is revealing. His politics was somewhat conservative, but his political philosophy was not. In his study of the original contract, Hume pointed out that there are basically two kinds of political philosophy. The first school traces civil government directly to God, the second to the consent of the people, assuming some kind of original social contract. Pragmatically, Hume saw virtues in both. Realistically, he saw no evidences for either origin in existing states. Almost all the governments which exist at present, or of which there remains any record in story, have been founded originally either on usurpation or conquest, or both, without any pretense of a fair consent or voluntary subjection of the people. This is very true, but is usurpation and conquest the truth of the matter? Or is there a true order? Or is there no truth at all in any social order? Hume's answer is important. We shall only observe, before we conclude, that, though an appeal to general opinion may justly, in the speculative sciences of metaphysics, natural philosophy, or astronomy, be deemed unfair and inconclusive, yet in all questions with regard to morals as well as criticism, there is really no other standard by which any controversy can ever be decided. The inclusion of moral questions is of note. The truth of politics and morality is thus derived from general opinion. The humanism of such a philosophy is, of course, transparent. Hume's a priori is here also the autonomous mind of man. Because Hume's humanism was so radical, he was dubious of the social contract idea. It meant a binding law from the past. Similarly, Hume was sceptical of pure reason. It implied some kind of law and knowledge from the mind, basic and innate within man. Hume's free, autonomous man has no ties on him from the past, and only the impressions of his own experience from the present. In one sense, this is a severe limitation and a very narrow world, but in another, within these narrow walls, man, bound by neither reason nor the past, is his own God, ruling in proud autonomy in a non-existent realm.